I don't know why I am invited for such a talk, because I would call it audacity and rather suicide. I'm supposed to talk on disease and literary imagination here. I was listening to the very famous teacher talking about those experiences of being a survivor of the emperor of maladies. And when you look around, illness narratives are everywhere. Why do I say so? I say so because just walk out to the Angamai junction or Matu junction or any other place. You go to a medical shop, just stand there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. You want to buy something. Somebody will come and say, and over the counter, what is called OTC, you get paracetamol or any such medicine. You take it home. Sometimes you go there, you are sick, sometimes you are still, maybe your child is sick or your father is sick, and you go, somebody will go there and by proxy you get it and put it there. Go back, take the medicine for a couple of days, and then maybe you are okay. Sometimes we go to a doctor. I often went to many doctors for many of my students. They say, where is the patient? I say, he or she couldn't come due to particular reasons. So they will just write, but you know what they will write? On the left hand corner they will write proxy. That is, without the patient, sometimes we go there, right? Okay, right. So they will allow it only once usually. They will write proxy and then they will say, okay, after taking the symptoms, it is important from the part of medical ethics to write proxy, and then they will maybe prescribe some medicines. Now, are they illness narratives? That is the question. Illness narratives primarily mean, generally speaking, narratives in which the person who suffered the illness writes about it. From breath to air, all calamities are disturbing, book. Who died, who is a very famous, one of the most famous neurosurgeons in the world, who died at the age of 36. He died of 4th-stage lung cancer. Now, that particular book I make a mention because if you look at the number of narratives that you have in the world, I'm talking about the 20th century, the largest number of narratives are about cancer. Right? And there is also a gender dominance in narration. That is, if you take the entire number of narratives in the world, around 63% of the narratives are by men. Right? Excluding specific cancers like cancer of the ovary, cancer of the uterus, cancer of the prostate, right? Cancer of the testes or penile cancer. You take these away, then there is a great deal of presence, a dominance of what may be called male narratives. So, it raises some important questions of hierarchy. That is, a doctor can write about his illness. That is one category of narration. Right? The second category of narration shall be a doctor writing about a patient's illness. Right? The third shall be a person, an ordinary person, not a doctor, writing about his own illness. And if you look at the degree of authenticity that is attributed to this particular kind of narration, as I told you, the greatest degree of authenticity is given to a doctor writing about a patient. Earlier in the PowerPoint presentation that Professor Chandramani presented, Autopathography, Patient's Perspectives by Jeffrey A. Aronson, she had pointed out how Hippocrates created the clinical case. Now once you accept the clinical case, what happens is that there is very little space for the patient to talk about. Right? So we live in the world of medical confessionals, illness narratives, sickness narratives, patient tales. Generally speaking, we make a distinction between illness and disease from the point of view of the person who defines it. The nomenclature is structured in such a way that when you talk about illness, illness is from the patient side. Disease is from the doctor's side. Now, I was trying to tell you all this because all calamities from breath to air, you will not sleep after reading that book. Those who have read that book will know. Such a brilliant surgeon who got the best award for neurosurgical research gone within months. And this book is actually not complete in the strict sense of the term because the epilogue is written by his wife Lucy Calaviji, another doctor, because he could not complete it. Galilee is slipped into, and as all of us know in US and other advanced countries, there is something called the living will and the advanced consent. If we are dying of a particular disease and if we are in a particular stage of the disease, we are given a lecture or a class by the very advanced doctors in that field who will tell you that you will have the symptom, you will have the symptom, you will have the symptom. Then what are we supposed to do? Right? I mean, this question is to the patient and also to the bystander or whoever it might be. So we are supposed to give an answer. Okay, if I am suffering from some kind of breathlessness or some kind of illness, should I be ventilated or not? Right? And once you write this down, nobody can change it. No bystander can change it. That is the rule. Right? So if I write down that I am suffering from this particular stage, this will have what is called a more or less invariable course. So I suffer from this illness, okay, somebody tells me, okay, at this stage I will have this illness. Then what should, the doctors do, the carers, the ethics of care. So suppose I say I don't want ventilator. Then nothing can reinstate or revoke this statement. You get me? This is rather something unacceptable or even unthinkable in India, even though we do the same thing every day in most of the neurosurgical ICUs and medical ICUs and cardiothoracic ICUs, when the doctor will come and tell you, okay, this patient's condition is pretty bad, this is moribund, okay, and then shall we wean him off the ventilator? Then you sign the paper next day and the person is taken away. And the person will be dead in a couple of hours or so. So my question is, I was trying to point out the trajectory of narration that happens in cancer narratives. Today basic focus was on cancer narratives. I will shift from cancer narratives soon to other narratives, right? Because we have Professor Chandramani already talking about that issue. I shall talk about certain other issues which are... My point is, from breath to air will have to be seen as an autopathography and also a part biography. Because at a particular point, all calamities said, do not resuscitate me, let me go. Right? From that point onwards, there was no ventilation, and again the question of intubation came in. So he gradually slipped off and died. Okay? And the remaining part was written by his wife Lucy Calaviji, and he was only 36. One of the most disturbing books written about cancer. Right? Some 300 pages, it's available or you can take it on your Kindle. or you can get it an e-copy or whatsoever, right? So my point is, what I was trying to point out is to find an intermediate course between what the patient says and what the bystander or any such person would be making a comment of. Okay. One important aspect that we find in the 20th century, if you look at the history of literary imagination and disease, is that 19th century narratives were basically about TB. Right? And TB was even valorized and celebrated in the 19th century. And we have enough reasons and depressing parallels. Because the 19th century writers, most of the famous writers that we know and we teach in classes, they died of TB. Right? The basic example is Keats. One of the most famous examples that we talk about is Keats. Failed, far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou amidst the leaves has never known. The waveness, the fever, and the fret. Here where men sit and hear each other blow. The palsy shakes the last sad grey hairs, the youth grows pale, speckled and dies. That but thing is to be full of sorrow, and let away despair. New doubt, hiding them beyond the tomb. So Keats became an ideal example. I mean, as far as the literary world is concerned, but they were valorized. TB became very much valorized. And a depressing pattern in the 20th century in Kerala, where we have Chanamura dying of TB. Right? So TB killed a large number of great writers. Keats writing in Rome. Because he went to Rome because he thought that the Mediterranean climate would save him. Keats, his mother, his brother, his younger brother, all of them died of, even the elder brother who later migrated to America, George, also died of TB. So TB was the master disease narrative of the 19th century. You will come across any number of writers in all parts of the world suffering from this kind of disease, and even the nature of spread was not even known, as a result of which so many people died. Right? When you move on to the 20th century, this TB narrative, I think TB narratives will come again. It's a bad thing to say, but TB narrative, as you know, in Kerala, highest number of TB cases coming up. It's a different TB, as you know. It is multiple drug resistant TB or totally resistant TB that is coming up now. You must have seen on the walls written, if you have cough for 3 weeks, go to the hospital, dots. Right? So I think the TB narrative is going to come back. So in the 19th century it was TB. In the 20th century there is a shift from TB to cancer. Especially in the early parts. Now there is a tussle going on between the cancer narratives and other illnesses. Right? Now what was the master narrative before TB came? That is another question that you need to ask. Right? It was plague. Right? Before the coming of TB, TB was there, that's another thing, but before TB, if you look at, most of you must be familiar with Devagiri. Right? For we are here as on a darkling plain, subdued, confused alarms of struggle and fight, where ignorant armies clash by night. What is the reference there? The Peloponnesian War. The historian is Thucydides. Thucydides is one of the first persons to record the plague of Athens. Right? And from Thucydides you have Lucretius coming a little bit after that, maybe in the 1st century BC or so, writing a poem called, some of the most beautiful poems written in Latin. It is On the Nature of Things. On the Nature of Things, which is about plague. Right? Nowadays we are talking about the coronavirus. Right? Novel coronavirus. Some people come here, they are not willing to go to the hospital, they want to go home. Some of them go to Saudi Arabia. Now, I will give you a very good example from Daniel Defoe, again our writer, whose second book, his first book was on his second book where he talks about certain precautions to be taken to prevent the spread of the disease. Where in that particular book he writes two things. One, there's a very disturbing description of people dying, right? Thousands of people dying of this disease, and the bellman coming and the living cannot bury the dead. Every night, a cart driven by horses would come there, and there will be a knell, death knell, to collect all the bodies. Thousands of bodies, hundreds of bodies being carried away. There is a reference there, that particular work about plague. It is so much of plague there, right? You find plague in Chaucer, where Artemis Day. Chaucer's description of plague might have been taken from Boccaccio's rendering of plague in Flanders, where because Artemis Day is set in Flanders, and Chaucer was a very close friend of Petrarch. So let me return to this, Defoe, the observation made by Defoe. Defoe talks about the terrifying, rapid spread of this disease, and people are putting, nowadays you see on the TV, so in this mobile WhatsApp, how houses are being closed and locked in China. Now, there is exactly similar description there over there, where Defoe talks about how they are trying to contain this disease. And how those who are a bit learned or educated and know something about this disease, there is a reference to one family which completely quarantined itself for 5.5 months inside the house. A very terrifying experience, right? And Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps the most wonderful of the Renaissance engineer, everything. He was a typical example of what Hamlet would say, how infinite in faculty, the typical Renaissance image that you have of Hamlet, that is presented in Hamlet. Where we said that, you have the word quarantine. What does the word mean? What is quarantine? Quarantine is an original word that means you have to be imprisoned in a particular place for 40 days. It is a Latin word. Quarantine. 40 days. And to prevent the spread of this disease from Milan to Venice, authorities were given the power to execute people if they did not allow themselves to be quarantined. Look at the depressing counterpoint with the current situation in Kerala. Right? You talk endlessly till you see blue to put people in quarantine. So Da Vinci, it's called Lazaretto. Da Vinci wrote to the ruler of Milan, Ludovico, that separate places should be created because it's a vast city, lots of people, lots of water, so many rodents, and this person would read letters only after fumigating it, and from a distance he would read the letter because of the spread of the disease. And eventually he said, no, I don't want any letters. So almost magic. It's a very long passage, around 1.5 pages, where he talks about how he would sterilize according to the crude system that existed during those times, so that he would be free from this disease. You have references to plague in King Lear. I hope you remember. Where King Lear gets very angry with Goneril, and he says, I don't want to do anything with you. Then he talks about the sore, about the infected, this big pustule and so many other things that will come to you, so I don't want it. You find it in Nash. Nash also talking about the spread of plague. In his work, you find it in Alchemist, Ben Jonson. So, during the earlier period, you were talking about plague, right? Bubonic plague, hemorrhagic plague, and all kinds of things. Later, it shifted to TB, right? I'm only making a general comment. There could be. What was the dominant narrative? What was the master discourse that determined the course of medicine or what's the, typical medicine as we understand now came only in the 18th century. Right? The first confessional mode was created by Augustine. Right? Even though in the first century BC you have a reference to Avitus, who is supposed to have talked about this kind of a thing. In literature, you have a wonderful person who talked about this kind of confessional, where the religious confessional and the medical confessional came together, beautifully coherent. There's a beautiful confluence and a confluence of these two things coming together. Who is that person? John Donne. Right? So John Donne was talking about his work Biothanatos, where he was talking about Eros and Thanatos, the fundamental currents, fundamental antithetical impulses in all of us. So you have this Biothanatos, one work, and yet another work where he talks about his illnesses and sermons and other things. The very famous statement that comes from this thing, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, that kind of a thing. Right? No man is an island. When somebody dies, somewhere a part of your own self also dies. So John Donne is a wonderful example. John Donne can be taken as a metaphor of how two entirely different streams of thinking, one the religious confessional kind of thing, the other the medical kind of thing, coming together in that. What I was trying to suggest is that there was a time when we were worried about what do we do after death. Right? I'm an atheist. My students know me as an atheist. Complete atheist. So I might be born in one religion, that's another thing. I'm a complete atheist. I can vouchsafe for the religion. So there was a time in which we were only worried about what would happen to you or me or anyone, not me, after death. The focus was on what would happen to you after death. Right? After life, world beyond our death, which is much better, without any APA score or any which is your net. Wonderful work. Now we think not much, that's my observation. We don't think about the life. If we think only about life after death, illness narratives will not exist. We think only of the present. Can we survive this illness? Will we die? Or will we be permanently disabled? Something of that sort. Very few people who suffer from illnesses, I mean serious illnesses, I don't think they think about what will happen to them after they die. Will they go to their maker? Or will they live in heaven or hell or limbo or any other such place or prison or whatsoever? Right? You don't think about that. What do you think about? You think about how will you be able to survive in this life, and will I be able to live with my friends? Do you remember one important scene in Sons and Lovers? It's a very anti-Christian novel. Why is it an anti-Christian novel? Is Sons and Lovers in a syllabus? No. So you are saying. In Sons and Lovers, Mrs. Morgan dies of cancer. The novel becomes anti-Christian for two reasons. One, as all of us know, she is given an overdose of morphine so that she dies. Even then she dies after some time. She struggles for a long time and she dies. So in that sense it is an anti-Christian novel. Second thing, there is a scene in which the priest comes and tells Mrs. Morel that it is good that you are dying. Not exact words. You can meet your father, mother, brothers, sisters, all of them are up there. So she says, I have been living without them for quite a long time, I don't mind. I would like to be here. You remember the text? Right. I used to teach the text years ago, now I don't teach, someone else. So my point is, you think about today, you think about the life in this world. How can you tackle this issue? Can you survive? Can you suffer chemotherapy, radiation, all kinds of things? Now, I don't need to go too much into cancer because I think it is a depressing subject. I have lost 5 students in my 26 years of 27 years of teaching to cancer. All kinds of cancer, including breast cancer, cancer of skin cancer, malignant melanoma, liver cancer, all of them in their 20s. So I don't need to dwell too much on that depressing kind of thing. I would like to talk to you about certain other kinds of narratives. As I told you earlier, cancer narratives are very important. Because of the rise of cancer, there's a particular period in which cancer narratives were partially eclipsed by AIDS narratives. The very famous work Mortal Embrace is again yet a very depressing work which talks about how AIDS destroys you and so many other issues. Okay. And teacher had pointed out to one essay by, the book by Norman Cousins, where he was suffering from ankylosing spondylosis. Actually, he was not suffering from ankylosing spondylosis. He was suffering from viral polyarthritis. Even though he wrote in that book about being, suffering from ankylosing spondylitis, actually that was not his illness. His illness was a viral polyarthritis. So again, this could be other factual errors. That's good. Later it was pointed out. He was suffering from this particular. Now I would like to talk to you about certain other things. We are talking basically about disease and literary management, right? We read novels, we read poems, right? One area where you have a lot of illness narratives coming is graphic novels. Right? Graphic novels nowadays, some of the most important graphic novels are about cancer. Right? So graphic novels by Muriel Engelberg, Cancer Makes Me a Shallower Person. Then yet another person by Martello, another work called Cancer Vixen. It's a very famous cartoonist. These are all cartoonists, right? Cartoonists are painting pictures, drawing pictures of their illness. Now the person who wrote Cancer Vixen is one of the most famous, cartoonists for the New Yorker. Right? Elite category. So that cancer vixen, you know what a vixen is, right? It's a fox, female fox. Cunning, manipulating, impulsive, obstinate, recalcitrant, all kinds of things could be given to them. So cancer vixen is a graphic work. She's a cartoonist. She is still alive. Whereas the other person is dead. Right? The person who wrote Cancer Makes Me a Shallow Person is no more alive. Right? So, what happens is that these are two graphic novels, cartoons, non-verbal representations of the disease with the help of minimal verbal kind of thing. One is a person who lost the fight, the other is a person who is still alive. Yet another subcategory of illness narrative comes from a modern understanding in genetics. That is, this is called, I think most of you are familiar with the subcategory of, cancer vixen is marvelous. Why? Because see, this is a disease that we talk about in which you cannot be humorous. I don't know. We cannot be humorous when this disease comes to you. Can you be humorous? Teacher was pointing out the various stages through which the mind passes. Initially you feel this is wrong. Then why did God do to me? I go to temple or church every day. I have serious doubts about the nature of Godhead. That's another question. But still, that is a sequence. Humor usually does not enter there. Right? These two writers, Muriel Engelberg and the other person who wrote Cancer Vixen, very high-profile people. Only when high-profile people write. Some people become very famous after writing illness narratives. Cancer mortality by innocent. Right? I'm not saying it's bad, it's good. See, if you look at US publishing history, you will know that there were certain people who are never known in their lives but became very famous after writing illness narratives. For example, Stay on Execution. A Stay on Execution is about blood cancer, leukemia. There is a very important political reporter writing about leukemia because he was suffering from leukemia. Before that, he had the US President Grant, suffering from throat cancer. It was reported. But this particular book, A Stay on Execution, is a book written by the person who is suffering from that illness. Even though earlier we had reports on the youngest American president till that point, who became president at the age of 46, who suffered from throat cancer as a result of incessant smoking. ceaseless smoking. So the shift is pretty important. To what extent you talk, to what extent the doctor talks. Right? And what we need to think is that nowadays we think of not the patient in the bed. We think of the patient in the world. Right? Patient in the bed means a small space. You go into the room, you go into the ward, you look at the patient, the bed exists, the patient exists. Nothing beyond. Everything is in a state of blur. Nothing else. Right? Nowadays the focus has shifted from patient in the bed to patient in the world. And we also become conscious of the living body and the lived body. The living body is amenable to, subjected to, it can be subjected to medical examination, gross examination, histopathological examination, microscopic examination, all kinds of examination. The lived body is different. So the living body and the lived body are connected, of course, no doubt about it. And how the living body and the lived body work in a particular manner when you are sick. Right? Somebody acts as a blind man. He is not actually blind. There is a character within a character who behaves as a blind person. Suddenly the perspective will change. World will take too much of care and other issues. Okay, they will look after this person and all that. So what I was trying to tell you is that, and let me return to the subgenre of cancer in narratives, that is the inputs from genetics. Genetics nowadays, as most of you know, all everything, നമ്മുടെ ഒരു പ്രശ്നം, those who study literature, നമ്മൾ എന്നും എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്ന ഒരു സാധനമുണ്ട്, ശുദ്ധമാക്കി പാടാം, നമ്മുടെ വയറ്റുപാടിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് പാടാം. Everything is constructed. എന്ത് പറഞ്ഞാലും കൺസ്ട്രക്റ്റഡ്. ഡിസബിലിറ്റിയെ കുറിച്ച് ഒരു ചോദ്യം വന്നു, അതൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് വേണമെങ്കിൽ നോക്കാം. എന്ത് കൺസ്ട്രക്റ്റഡ് ആണ്? See, medical, those who read medicine, those who read physics, everything, and those who are familiar with this thing, they know that we are going in the opposite direction. When scientific sense, everything is determined. If I have memory, it comes from my father, who has photographic memory. Right? If I have diabetes, it comes from my father. It came to me at 46, just as it came to him at 46. Right? But കുടുംബപരമായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് കിട്ടുന്ന സാധനങ്ങൾ തൊട്ടും മാത്രമല്ല വയലും നെല്ലും ഒന്നുമല്ല, അതിലൂടെ ഇതും വരുന്നുണ്ട്. So we are moving in the determinant. Let me return to genetics. I think you are familiar with BRCA. How many of you have heard of BRCA? BRCA is a very specific gene that causes breast cancer. BRCA1 and BRCA2. I'm not going to frighten you. There is something called emotional contagion. There are two books that are generally recommended to people that you should not read this cancer narratives because it will make you terribly frightened and depressed. There is an emotional contagion. By the time 2 days of autopathography, most of those people who suffer from some kind of hypochondria condition will naturally slip into that. I'm no doubt about it. 40% of the people are hypochondria. Right? You talk about something, you talk about sweating, you feel like a tightness in the chest, okay. Then you walk for 2 kilometers in hot sun, then you sweat, then you think, okay, sweating, then there's a tightness. Eventually, okay, I got an MI, inventing MI. No. So my point is, BRCA, this is those students, I never studied science in my life. I only studied literature and logic and philosophy in my life. BRCA gene created another subcategory of cancer narratives. That is, everybody can get tested for this BRCA gene. Okay? So you go to a doctor, this BRCA gene is not seen just or not in women alone, but also in men. 1 and 2 types. So pure genetics. Right? So BRCA gene, if you have a BRCA mutation gene, 87% of chance to get breast cancer. Right? What do you do? That is the question. There are 4 or 5 narratives which talk about this issue. You get yourself checked, right? Then they say that there is a problem here. Then what do? You go to what is called overkilling. What is called overkilling? It's a medical term, right? You go to an overkilling procedure by which what do? You undergo double mastectomy, right? You chop off your breast. That is, forgive the language that I use. You go for double mastectomy. Because you fear that in future you will have this issue. So this is another category of cancer narratives. At least 3 or 4 of them I have come across which talk about this particular issue. Women who talk, take it off my chest. That is the name of one this kind of writing, memoir writing. Then there are different, eating pomegranates, that is another work. Eating pomegranates, again it is about discovering BRCA1 type mutation in a particular person, as a result of which you want to, this is a preemptive kind of thing, right? And as a result of which you do. So that is one thing. So, yet another issue that we need to keep in mind is that of, again I came across another, see we all lead a not supposedly ordinary life, fast, move and all. What has it done to sports? If you look at sports fiction, I am not referring to fiction today, if you look at sports and its relationship to major illnesses, you will come across a book called Shout Loud. Shout Loud is written by Craig Slager, one of the most brilliant players, basketball player. He died of AML, that is acute myeloid leukemia, right? And it was his son who gave the stem cell, to protect him as a part of treatment, you know what it is. But then he couldn't survive. So Shout Loud is a work where this particular person talks about his problems. So sports, there is also in sports stream, you have this kind of a thing, where you lead a very, again, singers who suffered from these kinds of issues. So, understanding from science gradually will percolate into or permeate or rather intrude upon your aesthetic sensibility and your experience of this terminal illness, eventually leading to this kind of a situation. So, let us keep aside cancer for some time. Let us move on to certain other issues. We live in a world where the global aging population is very high, right? So gerontology and geriatric studies and geriatric psychiatry comes into an interface with the most threatening of the old age diseases, Alzheimer's. So there is an Alzheimer narrative running on. Now, one of the central arguments that I see these days is that Alzheimer narratives are becoming very, very important for various reasons. We are also going to grow old, so let us read a book on Alzheimer so that we can help others preventing minimum health. We use what is called quality of life. Barthel's system. Barthel's system is used to know how free you are. Can you put your buttons? Can you comb your hair? Can you feed yourself? Can you go to the bathroom? Can you put a churidar or a short? Can you brush your teeth? Depending upon a scale of 10, you know where you stand. The teacher had pointed out this diving bell and the butterfly. That was a film that I showed to my students 10 to 12 years ago in my college. Because we had one big festival on illnesses, where we had all kinds of illnesses. Diving bell and the butterfly was, we had shown that film over there. Then there's a very powerful film called The Sea Inside, where Javier Bardem, he wants to commit suicide. He's paraplegic. Below net, he cannot move. So he wants to die. And 2 women come there to look after him. And this is his only prayer. If you love me, allow me to, please help me to die. Because he can't move. He had jumped into, as part of swimming, he had his head hit the base of a pool or something, and it's a powerful film, Javier Bardem, See Inside, where he wants to die because he cannot move. This is gradually moving into the disability studies area, right? So the point is, Alzheimer has become very important. Lots of Alzheimer, so for example, Malayalam also one or 2 words have appeared about this Alzheimer coming up and how Alzheimer is going to be a big illness in the next generation and it's going to be a big global fiscal burden for every country. So Alzheimer, that is one dimension through which we are going. Yet another category of narratives come from multiple sclerosis, MS, autoimmune disorders and literature. Big thing. Multiple sclerosis, autoimmune diseases. Nowadays we know that rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. What? Autoimmune disease is suicide. The metaphor that is used is suicide. Teacher had pointed out Susan Sondak's illnesses metaphor and AIDS. Later came another word called Who is Afraid of Susan Sondak? Taking up some of the concepts. See, illness as metaphor is not a new thing. Is it a new thing? No. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark. Right? How flat, weary, stale and unprofitable seems to be the uses of this word. I shall put on a 90 disposition. So that is the situation. So that is management. Another aspect which I shall talk. So multiple sclerosis is there. My MS advantage. There is another word. My MS advantage. You can read it as misadvantage or MS advantage. And fine morning you are unable to work. Something goes from that. But you know what multiple sclerosis is. So there are MS narratives coming. Lots of MS narratives coming up, cancer narratives. Sometimes we use cancer as a metaphor. What is cancer? How do you define cancer? One simple way to define cancer, there are hundreds of types of cancer, you know, right? One way to call it cancer is a condition in which cells multiply beyond its usual speed or whatsoever, right? Second, what is the second quality of cancer? Cancer cells migrate, metastasis, right? So sometimes cancer എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അർത്ഥം എന്താ? ചെറുതായിട്ട് തുടങ്ങിയിട്ട് അത് വലുതായി എല്ലായിടത്തേക്കും പടരും, അതിനെ മുറിച്ച് കളയണം. നമ്മൾ പറയില്ലേ മെറ്റാസ്റ്റാസിസ് എന്ന് പറയില്ലേ? But it's called metastasis. So my point is, sometimes cancer is a metaphor. Take Cancer War by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, where the entire cancer war becomes, there is one person also, you know, that person is suffering from cancer, he is in an interior part and he wants to come, then cancer war eventually becomes a metaphor for the entire Russian system. Hutsi, age of fire. And another one where you find a woman suffering from cancer. Then Gain by Richard Powers, yet another work, where you find cancer coming, the person is suffering from cancer, then you have all kinds of things. What is cancer? മരിച്ചു പോകാൻ മറന്നു പോകുന്ന കോശങ്ങൾ. എല്ലാ കോശങ്ങളും കുറച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ മരിച്ചു പോകണം. മരിക്കാതെ ഇങ്ങനെ proliferate ഇങ്ങനെ പോകുന്നത്. When you come to autoimmune disease, you are talking exactly the opposite. What is it? It is your own cells affecting your own body, taking its signals, reading as enemies. Right? So when autoimmune diseases came into existence, we could understand AIDS better. Right? AIDS narratives, lots of AIDS narratives. I don't intend to go into that area. So MS is one particular aspect. Multiple sclerosis and all kinds of problems associated with it. Something should be said about madness. The madness was never a സമയത്ത് madness is a spectrum. Most of the madness narratives are basically based on bipolar disorders. Right? Bipolar disorders are conditions where you have extreme moods of carelessness, very happy, you cannot sleep, you are very creative, you have wonderful ideas. Then after a period you slip into the other thing. That is the mood of very down kind of thing. You are depressed, you are uneasy, you have loss of self-esteem, uselessness, all kinds of things. So bipolar disorders, earlier called manic depressive illness, is one major strand of writing. William Stryall, lots of books about bipolar illness, not self-help books. I'm not talking about the self-help books. Some of them make fun of. Suppose I write a book about cancer. I suffer from cancer and I write a book. Then on the blurb, you know, on the back of it, you have it. You know, this book will help the cancer sufferers. It will give them, inspire them. So there are writers who make fun of this kind of writing. Parodying the idea that writing about my illness will make you better, or it will, it will prepare you to fight this illness in a much more effective manner and in a cool, collected manner, a way of composure. So these are sub-genres within the mechanism, by which you talk about how developments from science, multiple sclerosis, madness, bipolar disorder. There are also works about anorexia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa is a very, actually we talk about anorexia nervosa as a simple thing. Anybody in the from the psychiatry department here? No. They know that anorexia nervosa is a high degree of mortality in anorexia nervosa. നമ്മൾ സാധാരണ വലിയതിന്റെ പ്രധാന ഉദ്ദേശം എന്താണ്? നല്ല നല്ല കുപ്പായങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഇടാറുള്ളൂ. ഇംഗ്ലണ്ടിലും അമേരിക്കയിലാണെങ്കിൽ 2 പീസ് ബിക്കിനിയാണ്. അതിനാണ് നമ്മൾ മെലിയാന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഇവിടെ 2 പീസ് ബിക്കിനി നമുക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ മെലിയ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു പേര് എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ how to disappear completely. That is one work. Last year, 2 years ago, a very famous model in Bombay died. She had only 23 kilo weight, 23 kilos. So anorexia, there are works on anorexia nervosa. Wasted, there's a work called wasted. Wasting means, body wasting, becoming thinner. In cancer, you have this thing, right? Weight loss, cachexia. What is called cachexia? Because these cancer cells take a lot of energy, as a result of which, your body is incapable of meeting the demands, as a result of which you lose weight. An interesting incident can be seen in the life of Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath's father was a very well-known professor. He was a polyglot and a linguist. He was very close to Sylvia. Every day he would cuddle her, every day hold her, hug her, because he was such an adoring man, very affectionate father. But one day he started losing weight. Again, this is again from the life of Plath, which again is part of Autopathography. Right? So Plath's father, initially he started losing weight. He's a very well-known scholar, right? Autopath, right? Very well-known scholar. So he started losing weight, and then he thought initially the disease that was then on the rise was TB. So he thought this is TB, so he stopped seeing his daughter. Because he was worried whether he would pass on this illness to his daughter. So she was shocked because they were all of a sudden a distance. Then he thought it was cancer. He was losing weight. So one indication of cancer is losing weight. You can lose weight for so many reasons. You simply jump initially to the it could be cancer. Statistically, it might not be you, as people wrote in one of the schools. Right? But that doesn't affect you, right? But I'm not operation theatre, operation going. ഡോക്ടർ നിങ്ങളോട് ആദ്യം വായിച്ചു, ഇവിടെ നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലില്ല, പുറത്തൊക്കെ ആണെങ്കിൽ ഈ ഓപ്പറേഷൻ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഇങ്ങനെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടായേക്കാം, ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ സംഭവിച്ചേക്കാം. നമ്മൾ പ്ലെയിനിൽ കയറുമ്പോൾ നമ്മളോട് പറയും ഇതിങ്ങനെ പറ്റും, അങ്ങനെ പറ്റും, ഇങ്ങനെ പറ്റും, അവിടെ അടിയിൽ ലൈറ്റിന്റെ മുകളിൽ മറ്റേ മാസ്ക് ഇതൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അപ്പൊ തന്നെ അറിയും. ബട്ട് ഇൻ US ഇൻഫോംഡ് കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ഇവിടെ ഒന്നുമില്ല. ഇവിടെ നോക്കും ചത്താലും കുഴപ്പമില്ല, ജീവിച്ചാലും കുഴപ്പമില്ല, എന്ത് പറ്റിയാലും കുഴപ്പമില്ല, വേണ്ടാന്നല്ല ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. So this problem, this fundamental problem that you need to face is Plath's father thought it was cancer. First it was TB, then it was cancer. You know how he died? See, he died within hours. In the morning when he got out to go to his, he was getting ready to go to the university. His toe, big toe, was read, "Daddy will know what I need." അത് പോയിട്ട് അറിയാണ്ട് ഇപ്പം ഇതുപോലത്തെ അവിടെ ഇങ്ങനെ തട്ടി, മനസ്സിലായി, ചുമ്മാ ഒന്ന് തട്ടി. Within hours, the big toe turned blue. It changed to gangrene. Immediately he was rushed to the hospital. It was only diabetes, right? And then he was rushed to the hospital. They said, "No way, you have to amputate. This is coming in pretty fast." They amputated, but then by early morning 3 o'clock, he had what you call this thing, blood going into the lungs, what is called thrombosis, pulmonary thrombosis, and he died. So Plath always believed that his father committed suicide. Very often in the university, she always told her friends that my father committed suicide. Suicide is a metaphor there. In diary, she wants to go back to her father through suicide. Because actually father did not commit suicide, but it was suicidal on his part, not to have gone to the doctor, and he should have gone, it was only diabetes clinic. So diabetes narratives, let me come to that. You have a number of diabetes narratives where you talk about type 1 and type 2 diabetes, that is Kutiyambu diabetes syndrome. So all a very depressing world, right? And we live in a world where the infinite love of God is showered upon us, right? So diabetic narratives, there is one work called Metal Jam. Metal Jam is about diabetes, and there is also another work called Needles. Because always you have to take insulin and take blood and all that to check the sugar level. So there are a number of diabetes narratives where you write about diabetes. Teacher had pointed out the issue of stroke narratives, lots of stroke narratives. Right? You cannot talk, you cannot move, then somebody has to take care of you. You have lots of problems. Stroke narratives are important. For example, a bomb with the brain. Bomb with the brain is a reference to, I had personal experience, my sister died of this illness. Right? So, bomb with the brain is about a small artery or whatever is slowly bulging like balloon and top. You die in hours, right? So that is another issue. So you find that in the autoimmune illness category narratives, you find Guillain-Barré narratives. Guillain-Barré narratives is not literature ingrowing toenail, right? A reference from the British Medical Journal, Autopathography by Ronson, says that nobody writes about, mundane, and some other writers have written about kidney stones. Nobody wants to kidney stones. It should be very dramatic, unless the disease is very dramatic, with lots of visuals. Now, have you seen photographs of sick people in narratives? Very rare. In your sick stays, if you look at one absence, I'm talking about an absence that you see, very few photographs of those people in sickness. I mean, you had a chemotherapy or radiation or whatsoever, right? Then you look very bad, agree. Photos of these people, even though you are writing about illness, the visual presence of that illness in its gross level practically absent. So you have diabetic narratives in which you talk about these issues, epileptic narratives, and the narratives about epilepsy. You have lots of narratives about epilepsy. Again, a treatable kind of thing. Bipolar illness, lots of. Schizophrenia, lots of. Anorexia and bulimia, lots of. So these are gradually entering into the world of psychiatric illnesses, right? Anorexia nervosa, eating disorder is a psychiatric illness. Anorexia nervosa is not treated by a gastroenterologist. It is treated by a psychiatrist. So you have all kinds of, thought echoing schizophrenia. You feel that your thoughts are controlled by someone else. You feel that others know your thoughts. Very dangerous, right? Allen Ginsberg's mother had this problem. Allen Ginsberg's mother, Naomi Ginsberg, had this problem that her thoughts were being controlled by Stalin. That is strange thought, that is delusional disorders. And you have also another category of narratives that are induced by hallucinogens. Marijuana, തുടങ്ങിയ സാധനങ്ങൾ കള്ളു കുടിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കള്ളോ മദ്യമൊന്നും മറ്റേ വിസ്കീസൊന്നും ഹലൂസിനോജൻസ് അല്ല, ഈ പറഞ്ഞ സാധനങ്ങളൊക്കെയാണ്. പിന്നെ ചില കൂടുതൽ സൈലോസിബിക് narratives called psilocybin narratives and age. For example, Ginsberg has written about age journals. സാധാരണ ഈ കറുപ്പ് കഞ്ചാവ് തുടങ്ങിയ സാധനങ്ങൾ ഇത് ആധികാരികമായിട്ട് പറയുന്നതല്ല. കഴിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇങ്ങനെ പറന്നു നടക്കണ പോലെയൊക്കെ തോന്നുന്നു, ഭയങ്കര സുഖകരമായ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാവാൻ പാടുള്ളൂ. അങ്ങനെയല്ല, അങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടാവാം. അതിഭീകരമായ പേടിപ്പിടിക്കുന്ന അനുഭവങ്ങളും ഉണ്ടാവാം. അങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടാവാത്ത ഒരു സാധനമാണ് ചില കാടുകളിൽ, വലിയ കാടുകളുടെ ഉള്ളിൽ കാണുന്ന ചില കൂടുകൾ. മനസ്സിലായോ? അതൊരു മഷ്റൂം പോലത്തെ സാധനം, സൈലോസിൻ ഏജ് എന്നൊക്കെ പറയും. ഇത് വില്യം ബറോസിന്റെ കാലത്ത് തുടങ്ങിയത്. You have all these. So these are all hallucinogens which do not create bad trips. Bad trip എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഞാനീ പറഞ്ഞ സാധനം നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ വീണ പോലെ തോന്നുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ മേത്ത് തീ കത്തുന്ന പോലെ തോന്നുക, അന്നത്തെ സുഖമില്ല. ഇത്രയും പൈസ കൊടുത്ത് സാധനം മേടിച്ച് നിന്നിട്ട് അതങ്ങനെ സുഖകരമില്ലാത്ത. So people go. Ginsberg went into the Brazilian forest to look into the presence of psilocybin. Can I get psilocybin? Can I get H? Or can I get mescaline? There are mescaline narratives, amphetamine narratives, dexedrine narratives. ഇതൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ MA പഠിക്കുന്ന സിലബസിലുള്ള. ഇതിന്റെ കുഴപ്പം എവിടെയാണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഇതൊക്കെ അടിച്ചിട്ട് എഴുതിയ സാധനം വായിച്ചാൽ ഒന്നും മനസ്സിലാവും. നമ്മളെ ക്ലാസ്സിൽ എങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞു നമ്മൾ അടിച്ചിട്ടല്ല. മനസ്സിലായി? The Light of 500 Suns എന്നൊരു വരി അമേരിക്ക എന്നുള്ള ഗിൻസ്ബർഗിന്റെ പറഞ്ഞു. ഞാൻ 10-12 പഠിക്കും. ഞാൻ പറയാം അടിച്ചിട്ട് എന്തോ എഴുതിയതാണ് പറയാം. That is one of the accessible poems of Ginsberg. If that is the case, what shall you? So you have that kind of faith. Now let me move on to certain other issues. These are called infertility. നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലൊന്നും വന്നു തുടങ്ങിയിട്ടില്ലെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. ഞാൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും പറയുക എന്റെ ഏരിയൊന്നുമില്ല. ഇൻഫെർട്ടിലിറ്റി narratives എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടൊരു സാഹിത്യം. I think you know that years ago when a couple did not have children, what was the general tendency? To put the blame on the girl. We even have films about it. It's one President's Award and all that, right? So if you do not have children, usually the blame is put on the male, saying that, the female, saying that she is barren, all kinds of field imagery will be used, right? Something like that, So you will have that kind of thing. Nowadays, you have male infertility narratives. Very disturbing, very touching male infertility narratives. One is almost a father. This talks about a man's years and years of treatment and other trauma and other issues faced by the fact that he has a problem, oligospermic kind of problem by which he is. So almost a father is a wonderful work by Denis Diderot, where he talks about this problem. Yet another important work in this field is called motility. The name of the work is Motility. It is also a memoir. It is also a memoir about a person who has a problem with his motility. As all of us know, without motility there is a big problem. It's not enough that you have enough number of sperms. No, the motility is very crucial. So almost a father and this particular work, Motility, they talk about this problem of male fertility or male infertility, or lower level of infertility. There are various categories within it. Let us forget this. So what I am trying to tell you is that there is an entire shift from female infertility to male infertility. A willingness to accept, a willingness to understand, a willingness to write about a problem that, okay, I have this kind of a problem or that kind of a problem. It is related to the so-called concept of masculinity as it is endorsed by the community in which we live. It is basically a gender-dominated community. On the other side, we have surrogate narratives, right? Women who are unable to, they are all touching news, very touching news. Once in a while you will have a film. You will have a film like Malayalam also there are a couple of films coming up, right? Yes. And also Devagiri is there, and I was not thinking of Devagiri. Miss that she kills herself, she shoots herself, she has a child. It's not surrogate. Where Aisha leader killed Uttar. So again, what I was trying to tell you is surrogate issues. You have a work called Sacred Thread, which is about a foreigner coming to India and taking a girl called Vaina, and that girl is the surrogate mother. Bringing in Finn, there is another work, which also talks about this issue of to have a child and then how do you have a child. Surrogacy, it's not a traditional surrogacy, but you are just carrying the child, and there are certain laws, very strict laws about it. So there are basically, as far as I know, there are 3 works. There could be 300. With the internet around, it's a flood of material. Right? You just do not know how many works you have today. I said 300 to 300. So, surrogate, these are all crises. You're talking about identity, you're talking about the body, you're talking about your own self, then you're talking about the so-called demands that are put upon you, 50-year-olds put upon you by gender, that is, you have to be a mother and all that. So, these are all issues that you need to take. So, surrogacy, you have 2 or 3 words where you talk about the central concern of how surrogacy becomes a crisis. You have a child with the help of someone else, then what is the relationship, what is the law, one is set in Australia, the other is in India, the other is in the third one, I just don't remember what exactly it is. Sacred thread. Sacred thread. It refers to, sacred thread could refer to the typical sacred thread of the Brahmins. Okay.
Bringing. Second one,
bringing in fin. Fin, F-I-N. It's a name. F-I-N. So, that is it. Now on the other side you have what is called abortion narratives. Now, years ago I used to wonder, in Trichure, where I live, my native place, in one of the artist's shop, there's only one artist shop in Trichure, in the city center, I came across a card. Usually നമുക്ക് നേരിട്ട് പറയാൻ പറ്റാത്ത കാര്യങ്ങൾ കാർഡിൽ കൂടി അവർക്ക് എളുപ്പമാണ്. നേരിട്ട് പറയുമ്പോൾ വളരെ സെന്റിമെന്റ് ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറയാൻ പറ്റും. കാർഡ് ആകുമ്പോൾ കുഴപ്പമില്ല. പലരും എടുത്തിട്ടുള്ളൂ. അതിൻ്റെ താല്പര്യ പേര് കൂടി നീങ്ങാണ്. I came across a miscarriage card. Now I thought, it looked rather strange to me. I was there to buy something else, but then there was this card sitting there, orphan card. Right, nobody to take up the card there, and it is sitting there, just there, and staring at me. And when I took and read it, it was very moving. In fact, people who support pro-life can do it, right? So there is such a card over there which talks about the so-called almost suppressed, silenced, quiet, personal kind of thing, the idea of miscarriage. Right? There are 2 words in this. 2 or 3 words maybe. One is about a doctor who moved from an anti-abortionist stance to a pro-abortionist stance. Sutta Vikarvat. Years of her experience. From an anti-abortionist position to a pro-abortionist position, she moves. It's a huge work, written by a gynecologist, not written by any ordinary person of the day. Then there is another work called Impossible Motherhood. Vida, written by Vida, where she talks about the 16 abortions that she had on herself. Right? Because she feels that her husband is some problems, and then you read the book. My point is that also you are talking. Then there is a work called by Sue Nadan, Soul Crisis, where you find this person talking about how you move from this position to that position, or what is the crisis that you face or feel in your life when you have a child or you don't want a child, or you can talk about pro-choice or pro-life or whatever these issues. Feminists will talk about pro-choice. I believe in pro-choice. So these are concerns. Again, that is also a part of this kind of writing. About Alzheimer, there is a work called Wrinkles. That is also graphic novel by a Spanish artist. Wrinkles. ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ wrinkles ആദ്യം നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിലേക്ക് ഓർമ്മ വരുന്നത് എന്താണ്? ഏത് മോഡൽ? ഇന്ത്യൻ കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ്. wrinkles, ജര. ജര ജാതക കഥകളിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നോക്കിയാൽ കാണാം. ജാതക കഥകളിൽ ജരയെ കുറിച്ചുള്ള കഥകൾ. തൊലി ഇങ്ങനെ ചുളിയ, നമ്മുടെ 7 മണി ബോട്ടോക്സ് ഒക്കെ അടിച്ച് ശരിയല്ലോ. ഇവിടെ തൊലി ഇങ്ങനെ ചുളിയുന്നത് അല്ലേ? Wrinkles is a graphic novel about aging in which there are only old people. Comics are generally, when you think about comics, you think about Tintin, you think about, if you are brain, you think about Asterix, right? Otherwise, you think about Boban and Mowgli. But graphic novel Wrinkles is basically about this kind of aging population. So, variety there are lots of variety coming. All kinds of Malayalam also, not in Malayalam imagination, take Kazakh Vidyasan, there is a smallpox. Syphilis narratives, for example. We may only be aware of ghosts, right? Ibsen's ghosts. But there is a suppressed memoir of Mary in order to work. അതിനകത്ത് അവര് ഇപ്പോഴാണ് പുറത്തു വിട്ടത്, 2000-ലാണ് പുറത്തു വിട്ടത്. ഒരു വളരെ ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സ്ത്രീയായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ അവരുടെ ഒരു പീരിയഡിലുള്ള മെമ്മോസ് ഒന്നും പുറത്തു വിടാൻ ഫാമിലീസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ 2000-ലാണ് പുറത്തു വിട്ടത്. In that it is very clearly said. It is almost it's what is called a medical detective kind of thing, right? There you come to the conclusion that this person must have been suffering from അങ്ങനെയാണ് പഠനങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. സിഫിലിസ് ആയിരുന്നു അത് പൂർത്തീകരിച്ചു. 1485 മറ്റാണ് സിഫിലിസ് ആദ്യമായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ ഇതിലേക്ക് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ ടെർമിനോളജിയിലേക്ക് വരുന്നു. ഇറ്റ് വാസ് കൺഫ്യൂസ്ഡ് വിത്ത് ഗോണറിയ. അങ്ങനെ കുറച്ച് പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്. അതൊക്കെ പോട്ടെ. ഇതൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോഴേ മാജിക് മൗണ്ട്, right? Where you have this kind of a situation. Somerset Maugham's story is anecdotal, right? There also you have people. ഇതൊന്നും കൊണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ ഇന്ത്യൻ പൊളിറ്റിക്സ് നോക്കി കമല നെഹ്റു spent her life in team. So what I was trying to tell you, it's a very powerful kind of word that is multifaceted. It talks about many issues. In Malayalam also you have lots of stories. I remember Mrital Kunyamdulla's one story about the breasts of Kalyani. I don't know whether you remember. ഒരുപാട് മുമ്പ് വായിച്ചതാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് എനിക്ക് കൃത്യമായി അര പേജ് കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. breasts of Kalyani. മലയാളത്തിലാണ്. ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലേക്ക് ആക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് അതിന് കുറച്ചും കൂടി ഒരു സാനിറ്റൈസേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. ധർമ്മപുരാണം മലയാളത്തിൽ വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ ഭയങ്കര പ്രശ്നം. ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ it has been given respectability by famous actors and all that. But മലയാളത്തിൽ തന്നെ ധർമ്മപുരാണം കുറെ വർഷം പഠിപ്പിച്ചതാണ്. ഇദ്ദേഹം ടീച്ചർമാരെ പോലെ പരാതി ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിലാണ് ധർമ്മപുരാണം ഒന്നും പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഇവിടെ വൃത്തികേടാണ്. ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലാവുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് അത് നമുക്കൊരു അകൽച്ചി കുഴപ്പമില്ല. മലയാളം ഭയങ്കര കുഴപ്പമില്ല. മലയാളത്തിൽ ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരുപാട് സാധനങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഫാത്തിമ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് കമലഹാസന്റെ ഒരു ബ്രസ്റ്റ് ക്യാൻസറിനെ കുറിച്ച്. പിന്നെ in the neuro ICU, in the thrombosis ward എന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് കമലഹാസന്റെ ഒരു കവിത. ഗീതാ ഹിരണ്യന്റെ ക്യാൻസർ ഒന്ന് മരിച്ചുപോയ ഗീതാ ഹിരണ്യന്റെ ചില ഒബ്സർവേഷൻസ് അല്ല, ടീച്ചർ എഴുതിയ ചില സംഭവങ്ങൾ ഇതിൽ പറഞ്ഞ ഫാത്തിമ. പിന്നെ ടോട്ടൽ ട്രാൻസ്ഫോർമേഷൻസ് ഇൻ ഡിസീസ് വിജയന്റെ കഥകളുണ്ട്. When death comes near to you, you can believe in other people's death, but you can't believe in yours. മറ്റുള്ളവർ മരിക്കുമ്പോൾ സ്ഥിരീകരണത്തിൽ പറയും, മറ്റുള്ളവർ മരിക്കുന്ന കാണുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് യാതൊരു സംശയവും ഇല്ല, അവിടെ മരിക്കുകയാണ്, ഇവിടെ പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. നമ്മൾ മരിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ലാസ്റ്റ് മിനിറ്റ് എസ്കേപ്സ് ഉണ്ടാവാൻ എന്താന്ന് പറഞ്ഞത്, അല്ലാതെ മാറ്റി നിർത്തിയപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ സ്വീകാര്യമല്ല. ഇതിന്റെ എങ്ങനെ നോക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത്, ഹൗ ഡു യു ലുക്ക് അറ്റ് ദിസ്, ഇത് ഒരുപാട് ബ്രോഡാണ്. ഞാൻ ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് കുറച്ച് എക്സാമ്പിൾസ് ഒക്കെ തന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് മാത്രം. Again, cancers that affect men alone. There are books, right? that affect men alone. Number of books about prostate cancer. These are all illness narratives, right? And what is the boundary of illness narration? That is an issue. How much is fabricated? And this issue, that this particular article that was pointed, this issue that was pointed by, the diving bell and the butterfly. Actually, now it is said that the diving bell and the butterfly was partially formulated by another stroke work called the patient, which he had read before he had this stroke. So, what is the level of reality? What is the level of fiction? Look at the title. Disease and literary imagination. That was the topic that was given to me. There are certain semantic anxieties there, right? Disease we take it to be factual, right? Empirical, scientifically proven. Whereas disease and literary imagination, where we are talking about literary imagination, would transmute this. Opium and the romantic imagination. Dickens, not only Dickens, Coleridge, but central concern. Right, where you need to think about what Coleridge wrote. He said, yeah, I wrote this after taking opium, then somebody came, and as a result of this, all the dreams were gone, so I have only 74 lines or 100 lines. Actually, I got 300 lines. So it is everywhere. I was just trying to tell you that there is a shift in the focus from one point to another based on the changing competing discourses that are being circulated here. ചില ആളുകൾ ഇത് എഴുതി കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഫേമസ് ആയി, ചില ആളുകൾ അതിന് ശേഷം ഫേമസ് ആയി. ചില ആളുകൾ അല്ലാതെ ഇനി ഡോക്ടറും പേഷ്യന്റും തമ്മിലുള്ള നോർമൽ കസിൻസ് normal cousins text is contained and anatomy of sickness is taken to be a case in which to what extent the doctor can be accommodated into the structure. There is also one work where the patient is the doctor's wife. Now what do you do? And there are also illness narratives that tell you that cancer need not hit you at a particular age. 20 വയസ്സിന് താഴെ 30 വയസ്സിന് താഴെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 40 വയസ്സിന് താഴെ 50 വയസ്സിന് താഴെ lots of works, no time to die, ഒരുപാട് വർക്കുകൾ. Then there is another work called Prozac diary. Prozac diary is a very interesting work about bipolar disorder. The medicine is fluoxetine. Bipolar disorder is basically treated by fluoxetine or sodium oxybate. So you have that kind of അയ്യപ്പൻ ചിത്രരോഗ ആശുപത്രിയിൽ all kinds. So I think I will wind up with the suggestion. Disability, I did not say anything about disability. I would like to tell you that the social model of disability is the reigning paradigm. Whereas I have serious doubts about to what extent the social paradigm of disability can be used, which may be discussed maybe sometime. Thank you. I think it's time.